Are the Seahawks finally putting the pieces together of a great offensive line? That's going to be the subject today, and I'll be joined by Sanjit T of the Football Scout YouTube channel. He also does some college football scouting. You've probably seen his film breakdowns and maybe even seen him in his appearances previously on this show. We're going to go through the pieces one by one, the details, the tackles, the center position, which he is very high on, and also what he has to say about some of that group competing at guard, including the grizzled old veteran and the young guys. We're talking offensive line today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell on YouTube for notification of future episodes. You can also listen on whichever audio podcast platform you prefer. Subscribe there so you don't miss anything. Leave a review or a rating if you like what I do. And if you want to listen to ad-free episodes, you can do that on Spotify for a low monthly fee. I'll put those details in the description. Other ways that you can support the show are just by hitting those super thanks buttons or buy me a coffee at also the link down below. So you've probably seen Sanjit on the show before, love his film breakdowns, and I always like to give this kind of context before he comes on because he's not a Seahawk fan. He covers the entire league. He started off when he first started doing YouTube content, just focusing on the then Oakland and then now Las Vegas Raiders. Then he started to expand his scope with his Football Scout channel to the entire league. But if you went and looked at the videos on his channel, you might think that he's a Seahawk fan because he's done many videos over the years, really lauding some of the talent on both sides of the trenches for the Seahawks. But offensive line is kind of his specialty, and that's typically one of the things that we talk about when I have him on the show, and today is no different. Really wanted to get his thoughts on some of the moving parts and some of the pieces that the Seahawks are assembling. We still don't know exactly how it's all going to look. We'll get another hint tomorrow, as Thursday is the second day that reporters are being allowed in to watch full squad workouts at the Seahawks voluntary minicamp tomorrow. So we might get some different rep distributions. Hopefully Anthony Bradford will be out there. He had tweaked his ankle last week, and we'll see kind of how they're lining up some of that. But let's just talk about from a talent perspective, upside, how some of these guys profile, and what Sanjit sees on tape from some of the young offensive linemen for the Seahawks. This is my conversation today with Sanjit T of the Football Scout YouTube channel. Always good to have you back on the show, Sanjit. And we usually talk offensive line. That is your kind of first love and a little bit of your specialty, although your scope has become much wider than that. Yep. Let's start with this. Last year on the show, you sang the praises of Damian Lewis.
Yes.
Loved him.
Yep.
All throughout the year, I would repeat that and reference that, and because fans didn't agree, and I started telling them especially after what you told me, he was going to make some money this offseason. Absolutely. And be in demand. He certainly was. What were your thoughts about the Panthers shelling out some money for Damian Lewis?
Yeah, the Panthers offensive line needed to get upgraded. And they brought in Damian Lewis, of course, but they also signed Robert Hunt, and they gave Hunt a lot more money. I think Hunt got like $20 million. That's going to be a nasty offensive line. But I kind of saw early on with Damian Lewis that he had a little bit of upside, right? And I think even last year he was phenomenal. And it's crazy because every time I created a Seahawks video on the Football Scout channel, and every time I talked about Damian Lewis and how great of a football player I thought he was, I'd always get Seahawks fans that would push back against that.
Yeah.
And I never understood it. And I don't know if there's someone on like Twitter or YouTube that is talking negatively about him or what it is. But, you can even go look at like Brandon Thorne as an example, who's probably the offensive line guy on social media, specifically Twitter. He loves Damian Lewis as well. And, to me, it never made sense why he got so much hate or the hate he got, right? It wasn't so much hate. Obviously, I know some fans respected him, but I definitely saw a lot of the opposite approach as well on him.
Yeah. It's sometimes I think guys just get lumped into a narrative, right? And the interior offensive line has been an issue for the Seahawks for a few years now. And, he by most accounts had the really great rookie year. Started from day one on the right side. They moved him over to the left side, and then there were some struggles on that line as a whole. And I just wonder if maybe he got kind of pegged with some of that from the fan base. But he moves on, and we're going to talk about some of the rookie additions in a minute. But let's start first outside, and we'll work our way in to those guys, because the news is a little less plentiful, but maybe more impactful on the outside. By most accounts, Charles Cross was seen to have regressed last year or not taken a step forward. We don't know how much of that had to do with maybe the injury. Those toe injuries can be tricky even when he came back. What did you see? Because I know you've been very, very high on Charles Cross in the past. What did you see from him last year? Did he give you some cause for concern that maybe his development was stunted, or do you think it was just a hiccup?
I could definitely see how it could be injury related for sure, right? You watch Charles Cross, and you would think that, hey, this guy's going to take the second year leap, but it does happen with tackles sometimes, right? We saw Ikem Ekwonu for the Panthers also kind of take a step back his second season. I think he gave up like 12 sacks last year, right? But he still had a lot of flashes last year, and I know Charles Cross did as well. The big struggle I saw with Cross was, he did struggle in pass pro a little bit. He struggled to really anchor down and really hold his own. I felt like there were reps where he would get pushed back. There were reps where he got pushed into the quarterback. I felt like he was a pretty good run blocker, but I think going into the third year, the thing with Charles Cross is we need to just see this guy continue to improve, right? Another thing to always keep in mind, guys are not Panay Sewell, right? Most tackles in the NFL are not Panay Sewell, right? And I feel like sometimes we have this thought process that guys should come in and year one, year two, they should just be dominant. That doesn't mostly happen, right? Colton Miller took until like year 4, and now people say he's like a top 5 to 7 tackle. Andrew Thomas for the Giants struggled his first 2 seasons. Year 3, he kind of started to break out. Year 4, he really took off. There are tackles across the league that are really, really good football players today, but they struggled early on in their careers, right? And I think Charles Cross is kind of fitting that same mold. But you see the upside, right? You can see the tape. There's so many good reps on tape. And I'll just give you another example. There's some guys you can see right away, this guy's not good, right? And I'll give you an example of a player that we saw early on. 2 guys. One is Evan Neal for the Giants. You can just watch him, and this guy just looks lost, right? He struggles with movement. He struggles being able to make contact with guys. He's leaning. He's falling all over the place. I think there's a good chance Evan Neal is going to end up busting out. Alex Leatherwood, we saw the same struggles early on, and he obviously busted out as well. Charles Cross doesn't have that type of negative tape, right? So there's still upside with Cross. And I think he's going to bounce back and have a good career.
It's interesting that you make some of those points about specific players, because PFF just came out with their list yesterday, I think, of their top 32 tackles in the league, and Charles Cross's name not on it, but I think my first thought when I saw that was a good third year, and he's in there. Absolutely. But what really struck me, and it really connected with what you just said, is a lot of the names on that list are guys that were at one point considered to be busts or washed up, or all their fans wanted him out. I think of Tristan Wirfs, right, who's now considered a top 5 tackle in the league. Well, he wasn't always thought of that way by fans in Tampa. Rob Havenstein's another guy in LA that's very up and down career, but is now considered rock solid. Speaking of rock solid, you have been extremely high on Abe Lucas ever since he came out as a rookie, higher than you were on Charles Cross.
Yep.
You have a video on your channel, The Football Scout, where you talk about the 2 of them and how they could be elite together.
Right.
Since then, lots of injury issues for Abe Lucas, kind of mysterious injury issues. Everyone got nervous last year when Pete Carroll used the word chronic in describing it. And the fact that it took them so long to figure out how to handle it surgically. By all accounts now, though, it sounds like there are some positive things coming out, that they do believe he'll be 100% at some point. If Abe Lucas gets that knee back to being healthy, you believe that he still has elite upside, right?
Absolutely. Rookie, just looking at Charles Cross, looking at Abraham Lucas, looking at those 2 guys, they're rookies. And I call him Abraham Lucas, but I know a lot of people call him Abe Lucas. I call him Abraham Lucas because that was his name pre-draft, right? So it kind of
just grown up now. He's
right,
mature.
Right. So watching both of those guys their rookie years, to me, Lucas had a lot more upside. You saw it right away, right? The flashes were there. Like you would see this guy just, one of the things that I always look at with tackles is how do these guys move, right? Are they comfortable moving, right? Because you can coach, how you need to land your hands. You can coach that. You can get stronger. It's not an issue at all, right? Every player gets stronger in the NFL. But movement is one of those things you can't really coach. It's why we saw, just this past season, DeJuan Jones had phenomenal tape coming out of the NFL draft process, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guy went to the Senior Bowl and dominated on like day 1 and day 2 and didn't practice the rest of the week because he just dominated everybody. But yeah, he was still, I believe, a 4th-round pick, right? And it's because of the fact that he's not very quick. He's not very mobile. He's not very athletic, right? So you look at a guy like Abe Lucas and you look at just the way he moves. To me, it just looks different. Now, he does have struggles. He does need to develop. He does have to get better. And the wild card to all of this is really, how is his injury and how bad is it? And how is it going to affect him as he goes forward? Right? And that's the one wild card we don't really know because let's just be honest, he's a tackle, right? With the injury that he currently has, it could impact his movement, right? And he may never develop. It might impact how strong he may be able to get. And he may never be able to develop being able to anchor down, right? So the injury is a wild card to it, but let's just say there's zero impact on him going forward. He's 100% ready to go. I think he's going to be a top 5 to 10 tackle in the NFL.
And then did you like the move they made in the offseason to kind of hedge against Lucas not being 100%, bringing in a vet like George Fant?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think bringing in George Fant makes a ton of sense. First of all, is this, he's a serviceable starter. He's not going to come in and just be an immediate, long-term, this is your guy, right? He's a 1-year player. He's a veteran. He's played a ton of snaps. He's good in pass pro. He struggles a little bit when it comes to run blocking. And the fact that he's played both right tackle and left tackle, he's taken a lot of snaps at both spots. To me, this is a perfect signing in terms of having like that swing tackle. Right nowadays, teams don't want to pair backup left tackle and a pair backup right tackle. They just want a good serviceable player that can play both sides if kind of needed, right? So I like bringing him in. Obviously, it does give you the potential if Lucas does miss time, this guy can come in and he'll play, right? If Lucas misses the first 6 weeks, George Fant's a good football player, right? I do think he'll have losing snaps, right? He's not going to come in and just have no losing snaps, right? But I do think that if you put a tight end on that side, you chip, you put the running back in the backfield, you influence how he releases or how those defensive ends release. I think he'll be a good football player, and I think it's a good pickup.
Have you had any opportunity, before we talk about the inside guys, have you had any chance, I know it's kind of hard to find video on these guys, to see any of Mike Jarrell, who they took in the 6th round, or even Garrett Greenfield, the undrafted free agent out of South Dakota State, who is probably one of the guys getting the most buzz in OTAs of the undrafted guys so far?
Yeah, so Jarrell, there's no tape. I think the school University of Findlay is where he's from. There's no tape out there. I tried searching, tried asking. But if you actually go to YouTube, he actually posted his all-22 tape on his YouTube channel, which is a great job by him. So I actually was able to watch a ton of those plays. Keep in mind their highlights. They're going to be the best 30 plays he has. Right? He's not going to put his losing snaps on there. But from what I saw, the guy was nasty. He plays with the physical mindset. He'll throw someone on the ground, and he'll make sure to hit them a second time as they're on the ground, right? So to me, I love that mindset. And sometimes you can't coach guys to be that way, right? You cannot coach guys to be physical and want to beat people's ass, right? It's not something you can do. But with him, one of the things is he is still raw, right? He needs to develop his technique. He needs to develop the footwork. He needs to develop all of the things to become an actual NFL caliber tackle. But he's athletic and he's strong, and I think that's a good base for him to kind of have. Now, he is, I believe, 6'4", so I'm not sure if he's a guard or a tackle. That's going to kind of be an interesting thing. And, the Seahawks have a ton of different offensive linemen that are versatile as hell, right? So I think they're in a good spot when it comes to their offensive linemen.
And then moving inside, I know, Evan Brown actually played pretty well by most metrics last year as a starter at center. And then just the 1 year he moved on, signed with Arizona this year in the offseason. Doesn't appear that the Seahawks really made an effort to re-sign him. They brought Nick Harris in to fill a very similar role early in free agency, most likely because of his history with Scott Huff, played for him at UW. But Oluwatimi, the 5th-round pick out of Michigan last year, he was a guy, you and I talked about him last year. You really liked him. That stuck with me. He got a chance to start one game this year and play in a couple others. I saw nothing. I've seen nothing from him all throughout the process that suggests anything to me other than this is a guy that should be a very solid starter in the NFL. And the team seems to agree because even though they say that Harris is competing, Olu's getting the first team snaps in all the offseason stuff. You're sold on Oluwatimi as a starting center in the NFL, and you have been since he was drafted, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the guy is going to be the starting center this year. There's just no question about it. I don't see a world in which Nick Harris beats him out. You know, I like Nick Harris. I think he's a good football player, but he is a backup center, and he's kind of been that for a while, right? He was a backup for the Browns, right? I think it was their center that ended up getting hurt that kind of allowed him to come in. But you know, Harris, there's not a lot of upside, right? Harris is one of those guys where he's a great run blocker, but he struggles in pass pro a little bit. He doesn't have the strength behind him to really anchor down in the middle of the offensive line. And I always say this, man. I don't know why teams draft centers that aren't very strong, right? Like they'll take these guys that are, you know, they're fast, they're agile, they're quick. And you need that in your center. Don't get me wrong. That's very, very important. But pretty much most centers kind of have that, right? But what most centers don't have is don't have the strength to be able to anchor down right in the middle of an offensive line, right? So guys like Joe Tippmann, right, was drafted last year to the Jets. I believe he was a first-round pick. Don't quote me on that. But he was strong as hell coming out, right? And he's had a great rookie year. Creed Humphrey was another center that was super strong.
You're going to get in trouble for mentioning that name on a Seahawks channel, my friend.
Okay, is that a bad thing?
Yeah, that was the year in that draft when everyone knew we needed a center. The position had been a turnstile for years.
Yeah,
the Seahawks decided to take D. Eskridge in the second round, about 10 picks before Humphrey went off the board to Kansas City, and it's been talked about ever since.
Okay, which makes sense. I mean, Humphrey's a phenomenal. He's the best center in the NFL, right? So, but I do think Oluwatimi has major upside. I think he's super strong. You see that, very smart. He's going to be the starting center. I would find it very hard to believe that he's not going to start this year. To me, even the game he played in last year, he had losing snaps, but you saw the upside. You saw the potential with him, right? And I think with the Seahawks, you know, last year there were a lot of injuries, right? Phil Haynes missed time. Evan Brown missed time. Abe Lucas obviously missed time. Charles Cross missed time early on as well. So I think with the Seahawks as you go into this year, it's going to be a little bit more consistent across the offensive line, hopefully, right? And I think with that, having more consistency, it'll allow the unit to be a lot better. And I think Oluwatimi specifically is, you know, I think he's going to develop into a true leader. I forget who it was at Michigan that was talking about this guy, but they're talking about this guy's leadership. They're talking about just the type of person he is, the mindset he comes with. And I remember, you know, when I was scouting for the center class last year, one of the things that I continuously read was how much this guy puts into wanting to be like a great football player, right? How much this guy puts into film study and those type of things. I don't remember exactly where it was, but he kind of had like we're talking one-on-one. He was doing that, but they're watching tape. And one of the things that, you know, there was a play where this guy made an incredible block and it was a touchdown. And he was asked like, hey, what did you see? What made you reach here versus maybe taking a step to the inside? And he was talking about how, hey, you know, I had seen this look on tape from the defense, right? They run this play like 7 times a game. And we had talked about it before the game that, hey, if they show this look and we're in this specific play, you know, you take this guy, even if that's not your responsibility, take this guy and it's going to hit for a touchdown. And it ended up happening, right? So to me, just the fact that this guy processes like, you know, in the film room and he's able to take that onto the field, I think the guy's going to be a great football player.
And then they have all sorts of options at guard. It's one of those things where I see so much depth. I see they've brought in a whole bunch of different guys. They're giving them all reps in OTAs. They're probably going to cut some guys that are going to be picked up by other teams. I mean, that's the way it feels. And let's start with the oldest and work our way back to youth, because all offseason, John Schneider kept asking about it after they lost Damian Lewis. They didn't make an immediate move to go out and fill that spot. What are you going to do about guard? What are you going to do about guard? What are you going to do about guard? And he kept talking about, we're going to address it. We're going to address it. They do in the draft. We're going to get to that. But then they also, late in the process, they signed Laken Tomlinson, a guy who's been an all-pro. not that long ago for the San Francisco 49ers. And then he goes to New York for a couple of years. And he starts like he always does. You know, he's just an Iron Man. He plays. He shows up every week and he's available.
Yep.
And it doesn't take a lot of effort online to find criticism of his performance the last couple of years with New York, that he just wasn't as good. And maybe that means that he's just done. How much of that, from what you say you've seen on tape during his Jets time, is on him and might indicate a decline in skills, and how much of it may have been a very, very dysfunctional situation on offense there in New York?
Yeah, so he gave up 7 sacks last year, right? And that was by far the most sacks he had given up. Prior to that, he averaged 3 sacks a season, right? Which isn't that much, right? I think 3 sacks is something that you can live with. The thing with Tomlinson, in my opinion, is going to the Jets, especially this past season, right? You go from Aaron Rodgers, he's misses the entire season, to Zach Wilson. Sacks sometimes are a quarterback stat. Right? People might not agree with that, but the best quarterbacks in the NFL are going to be sacked the least. Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, these guys are going to get sacked more often because they're just not as good. The ball doesn't come out. They don't feel pressure the same. So I think in terms of the 7 sacks he did give up this past season, I think a part of that was on the quarterback, right? So I just want to say that right away. I don't think Laken Tomlinson's gotten worse as a player at all. I don't think he's starting to regress. I think he's kind of been the same player, but I think the big difference is that the San Francisco 49ers have a great scheme. They have a great system. They have a really, really well-coached offense. Their offensive line coach is a phenomenal coach. And I think when you have those type of coaches with, Kyle Shanahan running the offense, I think that allows you to have a little bit more success than, let's say, whoever the Jets might have. Right, the Jets have changed coordinators a couple of times, right? Mm-hmm. So I think right away, just from a scheme perspective, that right away might be one of the big differences as to what people are seeing on tape. I'll be the first to tell you guys, I watched Tomlinson from this past season. Right away, you can see it. He's a smart football player. He's a good pass blocker. You can let this guy be in a true one-on-one with guys, and he doesn't struggle. You'll get some guys that are maybe, they're slow, so they'll get like swiped or they'll get tossed away to the side. You'll get some guys that are quick and they're fast, but then they struggle with strength. Tomlinson really doesn't have, he's just kind of above average with both of those type of things, right? So he doesn't really lose a whole ton. His run blocking isn't great. I'd say he's about an average run blocker. But I do find it interesting that the Seahawks brought in Tomlinson, who has only played left guard, right? He's never played on the other side, right? Yeah. 9,500 snaps in the NFL, mostly at left guard. I do find it interesting that the Seahawks, basically every other offensive lineman they have was basically on the right side. Right? Christian Haynes was a right guard. You get the guy out of Utah. I don't know how to say his name.
Satawa Lamea is what I've learned.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, he played right guard and right tackle over the past 2 seasons. So even Anthony Bradford, right, has only been a right guard. I think he played a little bit of left tackle in college, but he's been primarily a right guard in the NFL. He was a right guard the past couple seasons in college. And I would argue, Christian Haynes is going to start, right? He's going to be the starting right guard. I find it hard to believe that you take him in the 3rd round and he doesn't start, right? Because that too, he's a phenomenal football player. It's just, I would find it hard to believe he doesn't start. But at the same time, Anthony Bradford was just a 4th round pick last year. Mm-hmm. And, Bradford showed a little bit of upside as well. I'm not as high on Bradford as I was on Oluwatimi, but, what happens with him now? Like, are him and Christian Haynes going to compete for the right guard job, or is one of them going to get moved over to left guard? Because Tomlinson's 32, 33 years old. Like, he doesn't have much longer. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just an interesting situation the Seahawks are kind of in with the interior guys.
It is. And it was one of the things I was most looking forward to hearing about last week as they opened full squad voluntary minicamp. And the first thing that we did see was Lamea was the guy that is getting the most reps, it seems like, at left guard. And because of what you said, I was kind of expecting it to be Bradford because he did play some left side at LSU. Okay. And, obviously it's early in the process. Tomorrow is the next day that reporters can go watch the workout. So we'll see how the reps are divvied up then. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest question marks is that the expectation is, Bradford's going to get a shot to compete with Haynes at right guard. Although, because Bradford had a little bit of an ankle injury he tweaked last week, it was McClendon Curtis that was getting first team reps at right guard, the former Raider, who you're familiar with,
Yes.
who they poached off the practice squad at the beginning of the year last year, and then carried all year long. They were that high on him.
Right.
And then Tremaine Ankram's the other guy that they brought in from the Rams. And I think he got some left guard reps as well. But the one that I was happy to see that with LeMay. I want to get your thoughts on him in a minute, but because I like the idea of potentially having drafted your two long-term guards if LeMay can make the transition to left guard. But I'm hoping at some point when Bradford comes back to see him get left guard reps, because to me that would make the most sense. If you can cross-train him, and Haynes does win the job at right guard, then I think that's the best spot on the roster for Bradford to get the most value out of that 4th round pick last year, is if you can get him playing both sides as well. What have you seen? We're gonna talk more about Haynes to finish up, but what have you seen out of LeMay when you watch his Utah tape?
Very, very, very athletic. Very, very athletic. I talked earlier in the video, earlier as we were talking, I talked about, what I look for in an offensive tackle, the athletic ability, can they move well? And LeMay's phenomenal mover, right? He takes great angles. He's quick. I watched him against UCLA, where they had Latu, the guy that I think was a 15th overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was, and even beyond that, I think they have the Murphy twins, who are both going to play in the NFL, right? And he was just doing a really, really good job in pass pro, mirroring these guys, staying in front of these guys. But he does need to continue to improve, right? He obviously needs to improve when it comes to his run blocking. I saw him on certain plays, like he'll take the proper angle, and then he would just he wouldn't make the best contact with guys, and guys would just get right off the block. So he has to improve his run blocking. Very good mover. I don't think he plays tackle in the NFL, but I would give him a shot to see if he can. And I only say that because, he's 6'4" and a quarter. So from a height perspective, it's not a big deal. I think he's tall enough, but his arm length would be the concern. But he did play tackle in college, right? So, something to kind of keep in mind. And I only say tackle, I think he's going to be a better guard in the NFL. But I only say tackle because, how many guards can you guys have? Right? The Seahawks have so many, and all of them have upside, right? These aren't like average ass guys. Like McClendon Curtis has upside. Anthony Bradford, Christian Haynes, Lamua has upside. And then even the center you guys picked up, UDFA out of Kansas, Nowitzki, he has upside as well, right? And he can probably play center and guard. Yeah. Right. So there's just a lot of, and it's young talent. So there's going to be struggles, right? Let's not act like these guys are going to come in day one, no sacks on the court. They're going to struggle a little bit, right? But long term, there's just so much upside with a bunch of these different guys.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that shakes out. You and I usually focus on the offensive line, but before I let you go today, I want to switch over to the other trench because you did a video not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, about Byron Murphy and what even at the 16th spot in the middle of the first round, still referring to him as a major steal, as a guy that might have been a top 10 pick because of talent, but got pushed down to the Seahawks, fortunately for them, because of that run on offensive players in this year's draft. What is it that you see from Murphy that makes you think that he could contribute right away in a rotation as a rookie?
Yeah, so the thing with Murphy is he's on the rawer side, right? Rawer, I think that's the word. Yeah, he's on the rawer side. He's raw. He needs to still develop. He needs to get better. But the way this guy moves, it's unique, right? For his size, for the length he has, and the way he moves is unique because you don't get guys that can move like that, right? Plus, you saw some pass rushing upside in college as well, right? You saw him swipe people away. You saw him, turn bull rushes into speed moves, right? You saw this guy do little things on tape that, let's just say what it is. 99% of defensive tackles in college, they have no pass rush technique, right? Jalen Carter is a rare football player. Right, guys that can actually pass rush properly from the D tackle position is very rare. You don't get that often, right? Byron Murphy can pass rush from the inside, and I think Murphy's one of those guys that he still will continue to develop, but he's 21 years old, so he's super
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, one of the younger defensive tackles in that draft.
Yeah, and now I'm going to be honest with you, right? I think the Seahawks have just incredible depth on the defensive line. And I wouldn't expect Byron Murphy to come in day one and have like 8-9 sacks. I would not expect that at all, right? But do expect when year 3 comes around, this guy's going to take such a crazy leap, and he's going to be such a better player. And he's going to be one day a top 10 defensive tackle. But again, it might take until year 3. I think D tackles and tight ends generally take the longest to develop. Christian Wilkins took, until his 3rd or 4th year to really start to break out. We saw even Quinnen Williams, who some people are like, he's a generational guy. He struggled his first 2 years, but then he took off, right? He's a really, really good D tackle now. Aaron Donald is rare, right? Jalen Carter, those are rare type of players where you see guys dominate year 1. So I don't expect Murphy to dominate, but I do expect you to see flashes. There'll be guys like Nick Harris, for example, that are going to get their ass kicked in camp, right? Because Murphy's going to not only be able to outpower Nick Harris, but he'll be quicker than Nick Harris, right? And I'm not picking on Nick Harris. I'm just using him as an example, right? Sure. There's a lot of centers and interior guys that won't be able to handle Murphy's speed and quickness.
Why is it that defensive tackles take longer to develop? Is it just because they tend to get by on physical gifts in college and they don't learn the technique and they have to learn the technique? Or is it just one of those things that the level of competition, that the difference between facing NFL offensive linemen and college offensive linemen is that?
Yeah, I think that's the big difference. The thing with NFL offensive lines, right, is if you're an average tackle, you could be a great guard, right? Most teams have 2 really solid guards, right? Most teams have that. And now you might be in where these guys are younger, they need to develop. You also might be in a spot where guys end up leaving and they get bigger contracts. Like, for example, the Seahawks had Damian Lewis last year, phenomenal player, and he ended up leaving. But most teams have great guards. So I think, and then even beyond that, you only need 1 center. And so most teams have a good, competent center, right? So to me, when I look at going from college to the NFL, I think the competition is obviously different, right off the bat. But I think it's even beyond that, right? I think it is a part of, D tackle. And I don't know if this is like a high school issue where D tackles, and maybe it's flipped a little bit, because at least how I see it, in the last 6 years, we've seen more, we've seen better defensive tackles come out in the last 6 years than I remember like the years before that, right? Like, I don't remember guys being like super hyped up the way we have over the past couple of years at that D tackle position. I've also think the league has changed, right? We're not, we don't say we need D tackles that can defend the run. That doesn't really, no one really thinks about that. Like, I'm not taking a guy in the first round that's a run defender. You want a guy that can pass rush. And I think we overvalue, oh, this guy's a great pass rusher. Oh, he's a top 5 guy, right? I think sometimes we do that. The Cowboys have this guy in Osa Odigizua who's a great pass rusher. I think he's about to go into his 4th year. But the thing with Odigizua is he struggled against the run, right? So no one says this guy's a top 5 guy, right? The Cowboys fans might, but like generally people don't actually say that about him. Now, if he develops, and I think this is going to be the same thing with Byron Murphy, right? I think he's going to come in, he'll be a good pass rusher, but he may struggle a little bit against the run, right? So it might take until year 3 or 4 for all of that to come together.
Yeah. Justin Matabuike, another great example of a guy that took 3 or 4 years, but once he popped, he made himself a lot of money. Right. It is interesting that you say that about defensive tackles, because there have been some really high profile ones in the last 4 or 5 drafts, but then and this was another good example of it this year. If you didn't get Byron Murphy, I mean, the drop off after that was significant, and the depth just isn't there. From all accounts, it looks like next year that might be different, that there's 4 or 5 guys being talked about that are true interior defensive linemen that might go in the first round. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the possibility of maybe being able to add on next year to what is become a group of strength now, which is funny, because when you and I talked a year ago at this time, the biggest concern on the roster was that defensive line. It's incredible how far they've come in just a short amount of time.
Yeah, Jonathan Hankins, man, another guy. Keep an eye on him, man. He was with the Raiders a couple years ago. He's with the Cowboys the last 2 years. He's a great run defender, man. He really is. And Jermont Jones can play inside outside. He's a good pass rusher. Then you got Mafe, who kind of, at least in my opinion, broke out a little bit last season. I think he's gonna have a much better year, even going into this year. And Leonard Williams is, a top 5 to 7 guy. Mike Morris, to see what he develops into. I think there's so much upside with this defensive line. The depth's just crazy.
Yeah, just a reminder that you and I talked about Mike Morris last year after the draft, and you said, and I always have to qualify these types of comps because you're not saying he's as good a player, but that you see some Max Crosby in him at the time, and then of course he missed his entire rookie year with that shoulder injury. Can't wait to see what he does, especially reunited with Mike McDonald, who spent 1 year coaching him at Michigan.
Right. Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. Yeah, because McDonald was there. I think it was his final year, right? And then he went back to the NFL for a year.
Yeah.
If I have that right. So,
he's the most unique guy on that line.
Right.
Sure.
I think he has upside for sure. He
6'6", 295. Yeah.
Yeah, he plays with that motor, man. I'm excited to watch him in the preseason.
Yeah, same. Always good to have you on the show. I know you're a busy guy. What are you working on the Football Scout channel? What's your focus during these next couple of months when it's a little slower?
Yeah, these months suck, man. But you know what's cool about these months is I always kind of sit back, I relax, I'll play some video games, or I'll go out, take my son out for a walk. I do work, so I do have to stay inside the house. But it's always the slowest time, right? And I never know if I should start doing fantasy content, off-season content. That's just not something I'm very passionate about, to be honest. So I have been thinking maybe I can do second-year player reviews. I think this could be a good time to, guys going into their second year, right? So rookies from last year. Yeah. And then, even upside, break down guys like Anthony Bradford, right? So he's a guy I may touch over the next couple of days. So right now I think it's really just kind of figure out the schedule going forward. I don't think Drake Thomas played for the Seahawks this past season at all, right?
No, he's a guy you and I talked about last year too. Yeah, no, he got some reps late in the year or about mid-season, then he got hurt, but he seems to be healthy now.
Yeah, the Football Scout channel slows down at this point, man. It's hard to put content, and you don't want to put crap content either, right? Like you don't want to just push things to push things.
That's why I have you on, because I want to do good content. It's always good to have you on and talk football prospects and linemen in particular. _football_scout is the YouTube channel for Sanjit T. Thanks again for joining me, man. I always appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right. Take care, buddy. Okay. All right. As I've been saying, loaded some new music for the outros, and I didn't label any descriptors in my mixer. So when I'm hearing it, you're hearing it for the first time too. What do you think of this one? What do you think of Sanjit's comments? It's, one thing we didn't get into, but I think it's a given, is there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be an adjustment period. And, I know Seahawks fans are always hoping to show up to the stadium on any given Sunday and just see great offensive line play. It's not going to magically come together like that in training camp. Most likely there will be some learning experiences along the way, some good and some bad, as these young guys start to see things they haven't seen before and learn to work together. The great offensive lines in the league have typically been kept together for a year or two, and there's continuity. We've seen it in Cleveland. We've seen it in Philadelphia over the last couple of years. But then again, we've also seen teams completely strip it down and rebuild it, like the Kansas City Chiefs, with all new personnel over a 2-year period, right? And it works. And so, it'll be a testament to Scott Huff to see if he can get these guys working together and playing at a high level early in the season when the schedule's a little more favorable. I am Dan Viennes. You can follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that bell so you don't miss out on future episodes. I know it's a slower time over the next 6 weeks, but I will continue to bring you quality content as much as I can, and I appreciate your support and your views and your listens. Forever and always go Hawks. Thank you so much for watching the channel.